Welcome, and we're at the monetised water source collecting quite a few bottles of water, and I thought I'd take a break and share what I see unfolding is some really good news. Last week, for example, I was on that point of things look dire, but holding to the belief, holding to the feeling that everything is going to resolve all right, and in ways that the conscious mind can't even try and work out and put together as a story. It just unfolds. And what is even more beautiful is what I'm seeing now is, how do I describe this? If you were to ask me at one time, when does the age of Aquarius start, I would have said a specific date. But now if you were to ask me, I would say to you, well, which one are you referring to? The external one or the internal one? Because as above, so below, as within, so without, macro, micro, and so on. So when does the age of Aquarius begin? Well, internally, just listen to the word Aquarius. It's almost like a corruption of acquire us. When you step into your own power, when you have that self-realization that you are an immortal soul, that's a huge game changer, I can assure you. Because the fears, the worries, the anxieties really do dissolve. And to sort of use the same analogy as Paul of Dove and Serpent Tarot, this actually came out in a reading the other day, and I thought, I can see a middle path. So the way he describes it, and you can see life like this, as you're in a bird cage and you step out of one bird cage and then into another one and then into another one. And it's likened to, I'm guessing it's a TV game show where you've got a box with $50,000 and you can take that, or you can take the chance and go for billions, but you might get nothing. And are you prepared to take that leap of faith and possibly end up with nothing? But what about whatever bird cage you're in? You sort of look around at that bird cage, as it were, and say, hey, this is pretty good. But I don't hold any attachment to it, so I will appreciate the bird cage in the moment, because who knows what tomorrow will bring. But what if I don't see the bars on that bird cage? Same as when I had a weekend spiritual retreat, shall we say, which was actually a police cell. The four walls weren't there in my mind. They'd completely vanished. So it's perception on things. Do you see yourself as restricted, or do you see yourself as having a certain amount of freedom? There is a collective reality, there is a collective age of Aquarius, but there is also an individual one. Sorry, I'm getting something crawling on my arm. Don't know if it was a fly or something, but well, it could be my hair. It's also watching they're really amusing opening sequences to Archaics videos every now and again. It's I don't even know, it's somebody famous, and it's like saying, oh, we never signed up to Archaics, we took a different contract, we sold out to AIX. Well, even this in a way is a reflection of what's in the sky, the three crosses, the cardinal cross, the fixed cross, and the mutable cross. So you could say that you have the AIX, which you could perceive as the very negative polarity. There are those that subscribe to the VAX and went down that route. So that leaves the RKX route, which is taking the path of the individual, going your own way. There's a lot of people getting stuck on what can be fascinating things, but remember, the devil's in the detail with everything. From my experience, I would say, whatever you look at, only look at it as far as when you can recognize the pattern in it. So for example, history and archaeology, that kind of thing can be fascinating, very time-consuming and very absorbing things. But what needs to be weighed up in that is, what about the internal work? Because that is all looking externally. And I'm not knocking at looking at externally, because it does show an awful lot. It is about reflecting, it is about recognizing that this reality itself is a reflection as well. So whilst you may observe in time to come a phoenix weapon in the sky, and you may see things happen, why would you feel that it's even going to affect you? What about the internal phoenix, which is basically expressed as Christ consciousness, Kundalini rising? It's exactly the same thing, it's just different labels for the same thing. It is about the age of acquire us, where we step into our power, and you don't let that outside world rock your internal world. And if you want to see it in terms of space, see it as some projectile that has catapulted you onto a course to who knows where, and sort of like a spacecraft that is now suddenly out of control. You're no longer in control of your vessel because you've allowed an emotion to overtake you, or a feeling, or a story that you've imported and allowed it to affect you, instead of just seeing that they are stories. You've only got to look at the outside world. What has happened in the most recent years? So lockdown is effectively saying, go within oneself and meditate. It's undoing the twist of what the stories are showing you. And they are stories. I've heard stories of what has been happening in the UK recently, for example. And internalize that story. You could call it civil unrest, for example, or another term for that would be uprising. But what about something that is rising up inside you? And I don't mean the negative things like anger and such like. Can you tell we're around less than aware people? But why do they have to talk so loud? But it's not going to derail me from what I'm talking about. And perfect example, if the environment is not conducive to you, you have the ability to just remove yourself from that situation. See, there was no need for me to be all aggressive and negative and saying, look, I'm trying to make a video here. I view what the outside world presents as just a series of tests. And how you deal with these situations, I mean, these people didn't know that I'm recording. They probably think, if they've even noticed, that I'm just having a telephone conversation or a video call. But perfect example, don't let things get to you. Something I missed on the last video, and it's quite a good way of remembering it as well. The phalanges, I think that's what they're called, how it's pronounced, i.e. the bones, the 3 in each finger and the 2 in the thumb, the 14. So with tarot cards, the hand that or the expression the hand that you are dealt. Well, it's in a way the tarot is referencing the physical body with that, with the 14 sections in each hand. 14 and 14 is 28, which is half of 56, which is half of the minor arcana. Again, I feel this is saying you're in a realm of duality, but you're only seeing half of it, because only half of it can be reflected in the material. But what about what is happening in the unseen world? And where is the unseen world? If there's 8 billion people, there must be 8 billion unseen worlds, because some of those internal worlds may be full of anger, may be full of fear, may be full of anxiety, some may even be full of joy. It sort of comes back down to that famous Robert Oppenheimer quote with the atom bomb testing, and 2 people laughed, 2 people cried, most were silent. You've got 3 options there, for example. But the 2 refers to your 2 hemispheres, your conscious and your subconscious. And obviously the 2 and the 2 makes 4, which is a door. The other 2 are obviously the negative polarity equivalents. It's seeing the duality, seeing the 22, the 44, this sort of thing. Hold on one moment. Do you think the AI is like working through people to try and... It's like, why do people have to talk so loud and shout? Why can't they just have a conversation when they're right next to each other? That's 2 groups of 3. I wonder if we get a 3rd group of 3 with this. But just take it all in your stride. This last couple of weeks, it's like, can't you... And I've even said this on a couple of videos, can't you tell it's Mercury retrograde? Anything to do with travel and communication, all kinds of things can happen. And it's like, I just smile at it because, well, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in a Mercury retrograde, but I'm not going to let it faze me either. Again, this is something that's reflected in the external world. If you have a perception that there is a control system that is playing 2 sides, well, that is creating a win-win, whatever the outcome. The invitation is to pick a side. But you don't have to pick a side, of course. You can take that individual route, that middle path, which is a very narrow path. It's that line between the yin and the yang that is hidden by the yang, but it's there, and it's a weaving route. And this is also, I didn't actually say it on the last video, and I thought about it afterwards. I thought, I forgot to say this. If you look at the physical world, if you were, for example, going to build a road to connect 2 places together, you may have certain obstacles in the way, like very steep hills, where you'd either need to make a tunnel, or you could find a slightly easier route round and still get to the destination. So tarot cards and many other things, astrology as well, if you see it in terms of it's your higher self communicating to your lower self that is in this experience, in this physical realm, the communication is having to take a bypass route. This is something that towns do with road networks. You have the heart of a town, and often with the increase in traffic, you will have a bypass around it, so it doesn't clog up and cause congestion. So I would suggest that what is actually happening with these different forms of communication, that it is finding another way round to your higher self to your lower self to help guide you. And you could even see this in terms of technology. It's very easy to look at the negative polarity of, oh, they're collecting data, facial recognition, we're being spied upon, we're being listened into, we're being watched. Well, surely that's a huge compliment. Because on the one hand, the narrative says that we're insignificant and we can't do anything. But the very fact that there would seem to be all this elaborate means to try and keep an eye on you, see what you're up to, that must say something about you're actually very important, more than you actually realise. But the technology, how wonderful it is, and I don't see a problem with it from the the perspective I'm coming from. Consider this. How would it feel if you had this realization, whatever approach you've come from, whether it's looking at a particular conspiracy theory or from a more spiritual route, whatever it happens to be, how would it feel if you had no one to talk to about it, you couldn't find people who are on the same wavelength, and how isolating that would really feel? But thanks to the technology and the ability to communicate, that has opened up this wonderful way of connecting with each other. Of course, it does come with having to use discernment. That saying about there is good and bad in everything, well, I would have thought that is very true, because the perception of duality, the perception of two polarities in this reality, I'd expect that to conform to the same blueprint as well. Yeah, so going back to these phalanges, easy way to remember it. PHAL is the first part of that word, in common with phallus. I mean, there is the expression of giving somebody the middle finger and what that implies. But phalanges, so you've got things that look phallic in shape, i.e. the fingers. And then you take the langes part of it, you basically got angles, or an anagram of angels that is expressed in that. Because there is a code in these words, but the words, whilst they do reveal a lot in the spelling, they're also part of this realm which will only take you so far. But language and everything else, treat it like a stepping stone, because I can guarantee you there will come a point, depending on how far you get on your spiritual path, you will come to a point, probably in meditation, where you will experience things that there just are not the words to describe. And it shows how they have a finite point, because words are part of this reality. They are part of a finite reality. It is also a beautiful reminder that if everything is finite, that includes our experience in this reality. So the one thing that your real true currency is time and how you spend it. And so I'm not saying what you should or shouldn't look into, for example, but really weigh up how time can almost seem to vanish if you're really absorbed in something, where you start to disconnect from linear time, and you can't get it back once it's gone. Who knows how long any of us have got in this experience in these physical bodies, for example. Personally, I don't even worry about it. I'm looking forward in anticipation, but without expectation. And it's going to be fantastic as what is shown. I mean, it could even things were really ramped up, I would suggest you're going to get something very similar to the story given to you in the X-Men. You've only got to look at the two of the principal characters in that. On the one group of X-Men, you have Professor Xavier. Now, if I remember rightly, in the comic book story, the depiction of Professor Xavier is he's completely bald. The actor that played the parts in the film, I can't remember his name, but they sort of kept to that story, so he appeared as bald as well. So I would say that is also referencing the story of Esau and Jacob. Jacob, the hairless one, is referring to the inner man. And is it just coincidence that Xavier sounds very much like Saviour? And of course the counterpart is this character with these special powers called Magneto. So it's magnetism, so it's something to do with what we radiate out that is expressed. You could say the X-Men are the crossed men. Now, I'm not suggesting that you'll have maybe like laser beams coming out of your eyes, or the ability to fly, or become invisible, but certainly there are signs, early signs of this, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if it gets to the stage, if we're in a world as shown in Archaics of 2046, that all hell breaks loose and all these demons appear. Consider we're in a realm of duality. Consider that if there is that, there will be a contrast. So it may well be that you will find you actually have inside, in what is called your junk DNA, something very, very special that will not come out until the time is right. Consider what is in this reality. You have something called terms and conditions. Well, I would suggest the conditions could be the very atmosphere. If that was to change, how would it affect these physical bodies? How that DNA may even reactivate? How you would instantly adapt to a changing environment? The terms would be the time period, the conditions would be the environment. But essentially there is nothing to fear about the future. But I can tell you till I'm blue in the face, the only way you'll know this is to go through the experience. Try different ways of meditating, of going within inside yourself, of shutting yourself and disconnecting to some degree with this external world, to recognize and go beyond the superficial surface level. Now, there was a big theme in 2020 that definitely went beyond the surface level of the skin. Again, there's another reflection. It's making a point. But will you gain an inner standing from a pharmaceutical route, or is it something that you will find inside yourself? There is an often quoted saying that you have all the answers inside you. When you first encounter that, it sounds ridiculous. It's like, have I got to swallow encyclopedias of information? No, not at all. What actually unfolds is you don't need to look into anything. You will intuitively know from feeling, and that's the key thing. Learning the language, the internal dialogue with inside yourself, that gut feeling that is telling you something ain't right with whatever it is, that is the voice to listen to, the one that is inside you. But there's also discernment and weighing up, observing, seeing and listening, hearing different stories, then weighing it up inside oneself, finding the balance. Because even if it is a lie, I mean, the sky is a lie, as Archaics channel says, and I've said it as well, the sky actually is a lie. I've seen that for myself. But you can also see how the land lies. It's in the same way the expression about a photograph doesn't lie, which is very true. But the caption underneath that photograph might totally mislead. This is where we need to use our discernment and go with, our inner guide. But again, if you're struggling, then the door's open. Come and talk to me. I'm actually helping someone who hasn't got any financial means to sort of give me a donation or whatever, but it's not about that. I know what it feels like to be without money. I've been in that position. So, as Levette would say, it's paying forward. It's you could say it's a random act of kindness. I can help turn it round just by looking and hearing your story, hearing your situation, and then saying, well, have you tried this? Have you tried coming at it from this angle? And there's no physical or material anything involved in this. It's just purely a change of perception on things and opening up. Instead of seeing a future that you're going to be fearful of, oh, there's some weapon in the sky that's going to annihilate us and everything. Well, even if it did, how long is it going to take? How much are you going to be in pain or suffer? I would imagine in that scenario it would be over in a flash anyway. So why focus all your attention and put all that energy into worrying something that could last a nanosecond? Surely it's better to focus the attention and to create something you wish to see. You can still observe all that and see that it'll be validated and know that you've made the right choice. I'm pretty sure you will see some horrific things, but know that they won't affect you unless you allow them to. This reality is always, I've said it before, if you see the world as a stage, you are constantly being offered scripts, like earlier in this video, people talking loudly that's potentially distracting. It's a script of come and take part in a story that's going to be very negative, possibly lead to an argument when there's no need for it. It was all resolved perfectly. The last three that were talking loudly, the one apologised and smiled. It was beautifully resolved, and of course that moment has gone. I mean, that is perfect. It's like, well, look at the beauty and the timing of this. I had in mind to make a video, so the external has now presented things that help illustrate the message that I'm trying to share in this video. So in the moment, how beautiful was that? That you're faced with challenges to overcome, actually really minor ones, weren't they? And it hasn't affected the video. I've said what I wanted to share with you. And above all else, I hope the intention of this video is to get you out of dwelling in the fear state and looking with that childlike wonder, the anticipation without the expectation of what is to come, but also to not miss the moment, the very moment now, like you're watching as you're listening to this video. But I hope you're not going to just fill your time with just listening to videos when there is so much more to experience. But at the end of the day, all we can do is just talk about our own testimonies from our own experiences and share them in the hope that they are going to help lift your spirits and help you find a way to make it easier for yourself. Anyway, links in the description, anything, if you've got specific questions or you want a tarot card reading, if you'd like healing sent to you, anything like that, the door's open. After all, the channel is Dr. 144, so the communication is like a waiting room. but you won't have to wait long. If I see your message, if you reach out to me, I will reply and I will do my best to help you. If I can't, if it is something I have no knowledge of or no experience of, I'm not going to try and bluff it. I will actually be honest enough to say I don't know, or I can't help you with that particular thing. But that in itself is interesting. It's an interesting challenge. Is there anything that I can't help with? Is there someone I can't help turn it round with? I'd like to feel that nothing is impossible with that, because I am possible. That's what impossible means. It's a conflation of I am possible. Anyway, we've gone on for, what's this, half an hour now. Doesn't time fly when you're having fun? Anyway, back to filling the water bottles for me from the source here. Excuse me while I cough, and I'll just give you another little glimpse of this rather beautifully cool and shady place to sit after, because when you're out in the sun it's like, oh, it's still warm. It's maybe dropped a couple of degrees since last week, but it is still very much on the warm side during the middle of the day. But again, it's appreciating the surroundings, enjoying the moment. So I hope that has uplifted and inspired you, and as always, unconditional love to you all.